Hi everyone, I'm Law of the West, and for this video I'm going to be taking a look at the A2 Hercules Starlifter. This is going to be kind of a combination between being a first look and a buyer's guide. I'll also be doing a fair amount of comparison between it and the other Hercules variants, so in that aspect it's also going to be a bit of a versus episode as well. I'll show you a quick tutorial on how bombs work, and I'm also going to be talking about what players would be most interested in the A2. And then I'll finish things off by giving a tour of the ship. So this video is going to end up having a little of everything in it. The A2 was developed by Crusader Industries, which is a company that's already made a name for itself by creating several vessels that are more gun than they are ship. Every manufacturer has an underlying theme when it comes to their particular approach to shipbuilding, and Crusader is slowly becoming known for its over-the-top engines of destruction that are being aimed at the civilian market. And the A2 Hercules is no exception to this. It's the kind of ship that makes even the devs start to question themselves as to whether or not they've finally gone too far. It has almost as many guns as it has thrusters, and can carry a small army along with a full complement of some of the largest ground vehicles that are currently available in the game. And of course there's the bombs. The A2 comes packed with 4 Moabs that are stowed in a way that seems purpose-built for reenacting the Major Cog scene from Dr. Strangelove. And just to give you a sense of scale as to how powerful these weapons are, the explosion from these size 10s are so big that they can be seen all the way from the upper atmosphere, and anything that gets caught within its blast radius is instantly reduced to ashes. The A2 is one of 3 incarnations that you'll find within the Starlifter family. The first is the C2, which was designed to be equally as good at transporting vehicles as it is at carrying cargo. Out of all of them, it has the most commercial airline of the future feel to it, and it has the most creature comforts and quality of life improvements. It's also the most nimble out of all the Starlifters, but it only has medium armor and the least amount of weapons. The M2 is more of a combat vehicle transport than it is a cargo hauler. It sacrifices some of the C2's cargo space for an extra turret, heavy armor, and some more practical features like an armory and a room that's full of drop seats. While the A2 seizes the notion of being a war-capable dropship and takes it to the next level. It sacrifices some more of the cargo space, a few features, and a little of the vehicle storage that the M2 has, and in exchange it gets a ton of weapons and some huge gravity-fed bombs. It can also act as a rather effective staging ground to launch attacks from. I found the A2 to be everything that you need all wrapped up into one mobile assault platform that kinda reminds me of the Beast Fortress from Krull. It goes wherever you want it to go, and when you're done doing whatever it is that you're doing, you can just call all your forces back and relocate. I've generally found that when you set up a joint strike force, everyone who's involved tends to own a certain aspect of it, and their purpose usually revolves around what type of ship they're using. But the C2 is capable of doing nearly everything that you're going to need, so you're not going to have to rely on a fleet of vessels. You're just going to have a steady hand to guide your ship and plenty of people that are ready to hit the ground running as soon as it touches down. I used to think that the A2 was going to absolutely need to be escorted by a small complement of fighters for protection, which in reality is never a bad idea. But is it a necessary one? If it wasn't for that one blind spot that they purposely built into the Hercules that sits dead center right atop the ship, then I would have said no. But after doing some attack runs, I found that the blind spot didn't end up being the glaring weakness that I originally thought it was going to be, especially if you're flying within an atmosphere. That's because large ships like the Hercules have an easier time remaining steady as they approach their target, while smaller fighters have to keep their speed up and often are subject to wind shears and being battered around by other types of atmospheric conditions. So it's not going to be like it is in space where a nimble attacker can nestle themselves into a ship's blind spot and then stay there indefinitely. Plus, that doesn't even account for things like minimal threshold damages for shields and heavy armor, both of which are things that the A2 are going to have. And after you've landed this behemoth somewhere in the battlefield, you could use it to single-handedly unleash your own frontline assault force on the enemy. But this ship has applications that goes well beyond fighting for control over territories that 2 rival orgs have claimed dominion over. The A2 could be used to assault any type of ground-based installation, and I love how it can provide its own air support and turn ground units into radioactive dust. Then once you've landed, you can launch any kind of ground assault against it, ranging from tanks, ground-to-air support vessels, rovers, futuristic jeeps, or even a horde of Gravlevs. And on top of that, you can stuff the A2 full of soldiers like it was a Thanksgiving turkey. And then from there you can use the A2 to provide a safe haven for all of them to fall back to for all of their supplementary needs like extra ammunition, medical supplies, repair, additional gear, food, and be a place for them to refill their oxygen. The only things that it doesn't have are a dedicated repair facility or a medical bed, because if it did, it would quite literally be the everything ship, the Omni-Psi of assault vessels. It would be the ultimate ground-to-surface attack ship despite the fact that, in a lot of ways, it already is. I used to think that the A2 was going to be an intimidating vessel to try and gather a crew for, and that it was just going to sit there in my hangar collecting dust as I tried to gather half a server's worth of people just to run its basic functions. And to make things worse, as the game progresses, the needs that come along with owning a ship seem to be continuously growing. Specialty roles like security forces, tactical officers, medical staff, and engineers are fast becoming a necessity to have on board. And that's in addition to the basic crew of pilots, scanner operators, co-pilots, vehicle drivers, foot soldiers, and gunners. So whatever a ship currently lists as its maximum crew size is going to end up being a lot bigger in the future and will continue to grow as the needs for these ships keep expanding. All of that can really tend to feel overwhelming if you actually sit down and think about it. But the more I looked at this ship, the more I started to realize that things aren't going to be nearly that complicated. And one of the reasons why is because of blades. For people who don't know, a blade is a computer component that'll let you turn remote turrets into an automated point defense system. The A2 has 2 medium-sized computers which will collectively have a max of 8 blade slots. And all the A2 turrets are remote, which means that you could potentially turn every one of them into a hands-free PDS. And so if you didn't mind dedicating its entire stock of computer slots to controlling weapons, you could fully automate this ship's offensive capabilities. This would free up a lot of crewmen to do other things. And if you were transporting anywhere near the number of people that this ship can carry, you could assign anyone who isn't already doing something to doubling as a gunner. So between that, having an AI crew, and using blades, manning all of its stations shouldn't be nearly as big of an issue as I originally feared it would end up being. Plus, a lot of people tend to forget that every ship in the game only needs one person to fly it, and from there its effectiveness continues to increase as you get more people to crew it. And since the A2's pilot also doubles as the bombardier, even if you only had one person aboard, you'd have a giant flying tank that can still rain down death from above. The interior of the A2 strips out all the amenities like the couch, TV, the large galley, and the desk that the C2 has, and replaces them with a lot of the same things that you'd find in the M2. Like for instance, it has an armory. One of its walls is just a single continuous row of suit lockers, while the other is lined with weapons racks. Altogether, it has 8 lockers that can each hold a full suit of armor, which includes everything that's been put onto their attachment points and all the items that you've tucked away into their pockets. All the weapons racks vary in size so that they're capable of holding a variety of different kinds of guns, and it's got plenty of space that can be used to store extra ammunition. The room that's adjacent to the armory on the A2 is filled with 4 remote turret stations. In the M2, this room is used to house 12 drop seats, which does make it a better personnel carrier. But if you wanted, all of the A2's gunner stations could double as drop seats. And if you got really desperate for places to put your soldiers, then you could have them lie down in the bunks just before you go into and just before you drop out of Quantum. Which, when you add up all the bunk space and remote turret stations together, equals 12 extra jump seats. It's not an ideal setup, but sometimes you just gotta do the best with what you got. The other side of the main deck is where the bunkhouse and galley are located. This habitation section has 2 bathrooms, 8 bunks, and 4 storage lockers. It connects to a decent-sized kitchen area that even has a booth and 2 food stations that flank each of the adjoining walls. In all honesty, this more compact version of the galley seems to have nearly everything that the C2's larger kitchen has, but it takes up a fraction of the space, and it's the same as the one you'd find on the M2. The flight deck of the A2 has the same appearance as what you'd find on the M2. Both the pilot and the co-pilot sit side by side with a third auxiliary seat that's set up behind them. And the bridge is connected to the rest of the ship by a long neck that's broken up into 2 sections. The section that's adjacent to the bridge is lined with 8 escape pods. And the part of it that connects to the main deck of the ship has 4 large component lockers that are recessed into the walls. The one thing that the interior of all the Starlifters have in common is the main deck. And this wide open area acts as a hub which connects all of its points of interest together. One of its most distinguishing characteristics is a bridge that crosses over a sea of conduits which runs down and through the center portion of this room. Deep within 2 dark corners in the furthest most recesses of this room are where the main thrusters and several component lockers are kept. Modular-styled rooms flank the port and starboard side walls, each of which can be accessed through a set of doors that opens into the main deck. And a central elevator connects this floor with a cargo bay that rests just below it. There's one thing that I really like about this elevator, and it's that it's hermetically sealed so it functions like an airlock for all the floors that it links to. If you take the lift down 1 level, you'll find yourself in the cargo room. This entire area is one large cavernous space that spans the entire length of the ship, and has a dual purpose, which is to carry cargo and vehicles. The cargo room has a different setup for all 3 of the Hercules variants. When compared to the other Starlifters, the A2 carries the least amount of cargo. This is because the bombing carriages in the stern of the ship takes up a good amount of space, which is also going to limit the number of vehicles that it can carry. Right now, the A2 is the only flyable ship that can drop bombs. but in the future other ships like the Retaliator and the A1 are also going to be able to do this. And they've even already experimented with replacing the Gladius's missiles with small gravity-fed explosives. So in the future, almost any ship that has a customizable missile rack could be outfitted with the same type of ordnance. Bombing is a relatively new feature, at least it was during the time that I made this video, and I want to take a second to give you a quick tutorial on how it works. You can arm your payload by using the same method that you use to shoot missiles. And as you make your approach, press the middle mouse button to go into the target operator mode. This should bring up a blue circle, a 2D targeting display on your HUD, and a list that shows how many bombs you have. By default it'll only drop one at a time, but you can set it to release more by pressing the G button. And if you arm all 4 of them, you can quite literally use the A2 to carpet bomb targets. If you can't see the blue circle, then try pitching your nose down and dropping your elevation until you can see it. Aim the circle over your intended target and hold T to mark it. The circle should turn from blue to green and lock into place. And from this point on, you should use the 2D HUD indicator to guide you the rest of the way in. Once you've crossed over into the area that you've marked, the outline on the HUD will turn from a dotted outline into a solid green circle. And this green area represents the bomb's blast radius, with the middle part being its epicenter. And in order to get the maximum effect out of your bomb, you're going to have to wait until the ship's nearly in the center of the circle before you release it. Also, there's going to be a short delay between when you pull the trigger and when the bombs are dropped. But with a little experience, you'll start to get a feel for how much you should be leading the target. Once you're in position, press the left mouse button to drop your payload. It's good to keep in mind that this isn't a guided weapon, so it's going to take a while for it to land, and the higher up you are, the longer it's going to take for it to hit its target. So what kind of player would be interested in getting an A2? The A2 is going to be for people who want to actively take control of an assault force and be at the vanguard when it comes to attacking any kind of ground-based targets. There's also going to be a social element that goes along with the A2. It's big and it's got lots of people on it. And someone's going to have to be in charge of not only organizing the crew, but also the bombing run and the ground assault that you're about to be up to your neck in. So if you're the kind of person who likes to be in charge, then this is going to be the ship for you. Another reason for wanting to own this ship is because doing bombing runs can be a very satisfying experience. And the most desired position on the A2 is going to be acting as the ship's bomber. So owning this ship guarantees that, by default, you're going to be the one who's in charge of dropping the payload. That's because the bomber is also the pilot, and the responsibility of flying a plane quite often falls on the shoulders of the person who owns it. That's because they're going to be the most experienced at flying it, and they're going to be the one who's the most familiar with how it handles and how the bombing operation works. The A2 is also definitely a ship for players that are more action-orientated. It's currently one of the most aggressive and combat-focused vehicle transports that you could have. And if you're not planning on getting anything that's bigger than a large ship, then the A2 could be the fleet carrier that you use to transport all of your ground forces and a few of your smaller runabout-sized vessels. So when it comes to comparing this ship with all the other Starlifter variants, I'd say that if you're more concerned with being able to min-max at cargo hauling and are less interested in using this ship for combat, then I'd look into getting the C2. If you wanted a dedicated vehicle and personnel dropship and don't mind sacrificing some cargo space for better armor and more weapons, then the M2 may be more your thing. But if you want a mobile fortress that might as well have death from above written real big on the side of it, then I'd look into getting the A2. Well, that's going to be it for this video on the A2 Hercules Starlifter, and in case you're interested, before I leave, I'm going to take you on a tour of this ship, so make sure to stick around for that. I've been your host, Law of the West. Thanks for watching, and take care.